afternoon. I'm Kaylin George, Chief Communications, Development, and Policy Officer here at the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. I'm joined by Lily Berrickman, our Communication and Events Coordinator. And I just want to say good afternoon and welcome to our Business Academy, AI for Business Leaders from Hype to Outcomes. We are thrilled to be partnering with Alpha Innovations for this Business Academy. And just so everyone on the call knows, this is being recorded and you can rewatch it on wvchamber.com or on YouTube. Now we will have a couple minutes at the end of the call for Q&A. So if you can type your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. And Josh, I know, is eager to hear from everyone and answer some questions. So without further ado, I'm going to get to the point why we are all here today. I'd like to introduce Josh Spence. He is the Chief Information Officer for Alpha Innovations, a great friend to the Chamber and a great person overall. So we're thrilled to have him here today. And Josh, I'll have you take it away.
Thanks, Kaylin. Appreciate the opportunity to come here with on a virtual platform to provide some insights on where AI is and where it's going. And the Chamber is great in helping West Virginia lead business forward. So excited for this opportunity. Let me bring up the slides here. Okay. All right, so we're get started here. We're going to definitely get right into AI for business leaders. We're going to talk a little bit about the hype, and then we're going to talk about why the landscape's changing and what business leaders need to know to move forward. All right, so why this session matters? Well, I don't even know if I have to make this slide anymore. Obviously, you've heard about AI. It's everywhere, but there's also a ton of hype around it. And so what is the real state of AI today? And that's really an important space to focus on. No doubt about it, innovation is going to increase in speed. No doubt about it. There's some interesting predictions about what's going to happen in the future. But businesses need to focus on what's available to them today from an AI capacity and what's going to be right in the near future so that they can move forward. So leaders need that clarity, not just noise. Two, transformation is not just a technical thing. Digital transformation really actually depends upon leadership and the culture and the people far more than it does on the technology. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that. And then ultimately, the edge is going to go to those who act. Competitive edge is going to hinge on a mindset of continuous learning. And I like this quote, when the winners will be those who act with clarity, not those who wait for certainty, because that's not happening. And it's going to even be harder to find certainty as we go forward, not easier. So let's get into the next part here. So learning objectives that we're going to go over, we're going to talk about how AI is a tool, and that it's an important understanding that it is a tool and what that means to you. Some starting points for organizations to get started, and then the importance of context and perspective when using tools like generative AI. All right, so AI as a tool, understanding this is really key, and then understanding why defining it as a tool and why I define it as a tool is important, because you need to understand its capabilities to be able to leverage it, right? It has a predictive nature, not a calculative nature, which you're going to see, and proficiency matters. And then, of course, I got my pictures of West Virginia fall here, so these are not from this year. All right. So let's start with talking about the word processor, which most people in business are familiar with, right? Word processors have actually been around longer than you probably realize. The first one being electric pencil, which was available back in the 70s, and it was available on computers that still only ran DOS, right? So for those that aren't familiar with DOS, it was command line only, and there was no graphical user interface. So its adoption was hindered by the complexity of adopting computers at the command line level. Later in the 80s, we see WordStar comes onto the market. And the interesting thing about WordStar is it introduced the first concepts of spell check. And spell check is an early AI capability, right? Because AI is a broad term. It's not like just one type of thing. It's a broad technology term that includes multiple different types of technologies to include what we're seeing today with generative AI. In addition to spell check, you had mail merge. which I think is a really interesting feature to have available back in the 80s, because I'd say most people are not familiar with how to use mail merge, yet it's a super useful tool if you need to actually do that with a word processor. In 83, we see Microsoft Word comes onto the market, and it revolutionizes the way we do word processing. And it's because it's coupled with the mouse, right? So we give a graphical user interface to the user, and now they can use a mouse to point and click. This definitely changes the usability and adoption ability of word processors. Later in the 90s and 2000s, we get more advanced grammar check and autocomplete capabilities. So we've had word processors for nearly 50 years. I guess we're going over that. Who's proficient with them? Who would consider themselves an expert, right? Maybe, maybe not. Well, it matters, and it's going to matter going forward, and I'll show you why. So there's a real proficiency gap, right? That proficiency gap is key, and it's real. So we're going to start by just relating it to a hammer, right? I'd say safe bet everyone on the call can identify a hammer and understand its basic function, right? It's a physical tool that has a design that you can look at, and then you can probably decipher how to use it, even if you've never heard of one before. But there are actually over 40 different types of hammers, and they all have a different use, and therefore they have a different design. So although I might be able to use a basic claw hammer to put a nail in a board, am I able to use all these different types of hammers in a proficient way? Not if I don't understand their purpose, not if I don't understand how they work, and not if I don't have proficiency. So those are all important. Another example, and I love this example because a lot of people don't know this, comes from tape measure. So in this tape measure, you can see at the very end, there's a hook. And if you've ever used one of these that has this hook that moves, there's a specific reason why that hook moves. If I go to push that tape measure up against a wall, that hook moves in, and it has to move in because I have to account for the width of the hook into my calculation of measurement if I want a precise measure. However, if I use that tape measure and I hook it on the end of a board and pull it, guess what? The hook slides. Now it's taking into account that I'm not using the width of the hook as part of the measurement. Again, how many people know that? Pop quiz, feel free, rhetorical, obviously, but it's one of these things most people have no clue that that's what that's for. But once you know, guess what? Now you can use that. Now you can leverage it because you understand its purposeful feature. And this also helps us understand that with tools, there's limitations, and then experience and awareness matter. So we're going to go back to the 80s and 90s. And so I'm a Gen Xer, and I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And this is yet another tool we're going to talk about, and it's going to directly relate into how we get to AI. And that's the calculator. And so math class, right? Many of you probably were in math class and maybe were allowed to use the calculator in class. Maybe you were allowed to use it at homework, but you weren't allowed to use the calculator on the test. Why can't I use a calculator on the test? Well, you're not going to always carry a calculator around with you, are you? Well, yeah, about that. We know we do now, right? Didn't know it then, but we do. We actually carry a calculator around everywhere we go. But even though we do carry that, can you use it if you don't understand the fundamentals about math, right? If you don't know addition, subtraction, division, square root, what does that tool do for you? Nothing. So again, you have to understand and have a proficiency to leverage it. So again, talking about a lot of tools, why they're important, and why it's important to understand how they work. And that leads us up to where we're going to get into this piece with AI and why AI is a tool. Because a tool's value hinges on its user, right? The tool requires an understanding of its purpose and its design, concepts and practice. Possession of a tool doesn't mean proficiency. And I'll tell you going forward with the change that artificial intelligence is going to bring into our world, proficiency with digital tools is no longer an advantage. It's the minimum standard. And we'll get into that here in a second. So let's look at why I want to tell you AI is a tool and why that matters when you understand how it works. The number one statement I hear from people when I talk about AI is they'll tell me this statement right here. Most common thing I hear. I asked ChatGPT a question and it got it wrong, right? You might have said it yourself. You've probably witnessed it, right? This is what I hear. And there's a reason why this is a misconception of what ChatGPT and other generative tools actually do. And we need to understand that design and purpose if you're going to be proficient with the tool. All right. So how are we going to do that? Let's see. Let's go to the video demo. All right, I'm going to share a different screen. I'm going to let it load here. And so when we're looking at generative AI, what we have to understand is it's not a calculator in the sense of the way a calculator works. It's actually a prediction engine. It is seeking to use pattern recognition, and it gets far more advanced than that. But at the end of the day, it is predicting the next word. And so this demonstration is going to help us better understand why that matters when using a tool like that. All right. So the first question I've asked in this video is, what is the Declaration of Independence and why is it important in American history? And you can see, no doubt about it, it can answer that question, no problem. And so I'm like, all right, well, let's take it a step further. Provide me the full text of the Declaration of Independence. And in this situation, no problem, it can provide that to me. And it's updating it as it goes, and you can see where it's moving down this to get the full Declaration of Independence. All right. So now we're going to ask it another question, and we're going to give it a challenge. We're going to say, provide the 14th character, the 25th word, and the 30th sentence of the Declaration of Independence verbatim. Now it's got to calculate. If you and I were going to do that, we would literally count, right, the numbers of letters, the numbers of words, and then the numbers of sentences until we got to the answer. But that's not what generative AI does. It's predicting the answer based upon pattern recognition. So you can see here, this is the first answer it gave me, and the 14th character in this one was E. The 25th word was unalienable. Let's see what else we get. So then we asked it in a different chat, and we got a different letter with J. The word was dissolve in a different sentence. And then just so that we can prove the point, did it a third time, and it's going to get it different. It's going to give me different answers again. So we got J again right, but this time it said the word was and it gave me a different 30th sentence. So this is a problem with, again, assuming that AI, or generative AI to be more specific, is going to operate like a calculator, because that's not actually how it operates. So what good is it then, right? Why is it useful if it's going to be wrong? Well, let's understand how generative AI can use multiple sources of different information to then create something new to be generative. So here we're going to continue with the same conversation, and we're going to talk about John Denver, right? We're in West Virginia. So we could talk about John Denver and his contributions to music, and no big surprise, it's going to provide me an answer to that because it's well versed on that. It's public knowledge around John Denver. So it's given me some stuff about his musical style and influence, right? Okay, now let's get to where we can take it a step further. We've talked about the Declaration of Independence. We've talked about something completely different in John Denver. Let's write lyrics for a song in the style of John Denver that celebrates the Declaration of Independence, focusing on freedom, independence, and the American spirit. Can generative AI do that? Hands down, no doubt, it can do that, right? This is where it shines.
In the summer of '76, the air was warm and still. Men from 13 colonies gathered on a Philadelphia hill. They spoke of grievances and rights, and a king across the sea.
All right, I'm going to switch back over to the presentation. All right, now I will tell you, if you go out and try to repeat this demo, which you can, you'll find that some of the large language models will not give you the full text of the Declaration of Independence. They will tell you that they are not a good source for that. And what you're seeing is the model's getting better trained to answer questions based upon its core capabilities of what it's good at, and then cautioning the user to ask it something that it may not be actually good at. And that would be to provide like a verbatim type of text like that. So just know that they are getting better. But again, it's important to understand that they're operating differently, and that difference is part of its design. And then by understanding that, you can become much more proficient in how you use it. So let's just do section 1 recap. We know that AI is a tool that predicts, it doesn't know. And we can get into a whole different debate at another time whether or not AI actually reasons or it's just a really, really good mimic of human reasoning. I have my own thoughts on that, but well, that's another conversation. Um, Second, we covered AI requires an understanding and proficiency going forward, and its value, especially to business, is going to be tied to proficiency of the people using it. So you got to get to where we're proficient. So how do organizations do that? How do they become proficient? So let's look at where we can start when it comes to transformation. All right, let's start with the hype, right? There's a lot of hype. Global AI market projected to exceed $1 trillion by 2030. And I've seen all these numbers. They're all over the place, but they're usually just large, large numbers. I thought this one was interesting. Agentic AI will autonomously resolve 80% of customer service issues, common customer service issues, without human intervention. And then executives rank AI among the top 3 strategic priorities. So there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of attention, and it's moving forward. So there's a problem, and here's where the problem resides. And that is most transformations fail. And there's a lot of data to prove this. Digital transformations do not usually succeed at meeting the objectives set out to meet. And I've seen this number anywhere between 70 and about 88%, and that is that most transformations fail to meet business objectives of the change. And then, Harvard Business Review also had this good one about 70% of the money spent on digital transformation is wasted. And there's a big reason for why that happens, and we want to talk about that. And the main reason of why these fail, it comes around these items, but it's going to be people related. Ultimately, these failures are rooted in people related challenges, not just the technical ones. You have a lack of goals, or those goals are not clear. You're unprepared for setbacks. There are conflicting priorities. There's a poor technology adoption or poor internal engagement. And then that results in what many of us probably have heard before. Well, I'm just going to go back and do it the way we've always done it. And again, you might be able to get the task done and you may be able to get through that week, but you're not doing any type of innovative change if you just keep going back to doing it the way it's always been done. But again, to change, you got to focus on the people. And so we already talked about proficiency. People need to have that proficiency for this digital change that's upon us with AI. Upskilling and training programs are going to be essential for employees. Culture is huge. Your culture may be overall open to change, or maybe it's not. It's a culture that's not open to change. There could be pockets within the culture that may be more inclined to be willing to be that starting point for change. It's important to understand that so that you can identify where you may want to start this digital change. And then leadership. I'm a big fan of John Maxwell. Everything rises and falls on leadership, and leadership has to champion this move. Without it, it just reverts back to doing it the way you've always done it. So leadership is key. Now we're going to switch gears and we are going to talk about the technology side of the house with digital transformation, because it is important to recognize you are using technology as a core component of the change. But where does it sit? And unfortunately, a lot of times in organizations, technology just sits in this one large bucket of its tech. And then you rely on maybe even one person within your staff to be the tech guru, and everything falls upon them. Yet that might have been fine in 1980. That might have been fine in the 1990s. And that might have been fine in the 2000s. It is not fine in 2025 because most businesses cannot operate without the digital footprint that they use to carry out their operations and their business. In fact, we see most small and medium-sized businesses will actually fail if they suffer a significant ransomware cyber attack because they are not able to recover because they're so dependent upon that digital piece of the puzzle. So we need to change the way we look at technology within organizations. And so this is an attempt to break it out and show you where the value comes from when it comes to business and technology. Sure, we're all on devices today. I'm down at the bottom of the pyramid, right? I'm one up, and we're going to talk about devices because that's what we all readily recognize as technology because we use them constantly. We're using them right now. I'm on a computer. You could be on a tablet. You could be on a laptop. You could be on a phone and be participating in this webinar right now. And device is the interface in which the human touches and relates with that technology, right? Now, if we go below the devices, this is the traditional viewpoint of technology. It's the infrastructure, it's the back end, it's what makes it work, the enabling pieces of the puzzle. And those are important. Those have to exist. You have to have your network. You have to have your servers or your cloud servers, whether they're on-prem, in the cloud, or on a private cloud. You have to have cybersecurity. Those are all foundational technologies that are an important component of your business. But let's look above foundational technologies and devices, and we see applications or apps, right? Those are where you really get into the initial parts of value for the business, right? Because that's where the work is being done, whether they're common business productivity apps like we talked about earlier with Microsoft Word or Google Docs, or they're collaboration apps like Zoom, which is we're on today, or using Microsoft Teams or Slack, or they're specific to your industry business applications. You're going to use those applications to carry out a function. When you step above those applications, you get into the data layer. All of those applications have data, they generate data, they process data, and data is going to grow exponentially in the AI world, and it's going to create even more need for AI. So you got your applications and then you've got your data. And the data, a lot of times in a lot of organizations, will sit way underutilized because it's only being used in the siloed application in which it sits in, instead of being used across the organization with other data sets to bring insights and opportunities to the organization. And so data is a huge layer that's going to only be more important going forward. I will make note that I liked finding the icon for the small floppy disk. I don't know how many people remember those, but I thought that was funny that that icon was still out there to be grabbed. And then the top layer of this is all around the AI, right? So now you've got AI features being integrated into those business applications we already talked about, or you have standalone AI applications that are being brought in to integrate within. Those three layers, the AI, the data, and the application layers, are critical to organizations gaining value out of their technology investments. But here's the problem. Because we bucket technology in one big bucket and we tend to only deal with the device in our hands and the people that are enabling the devices on the back end, we miss the value opportunity that the applications, the data, and the AI bring. So I would argue if our organization is a high reliance on the digital, if you're going to go forward with AI as part of a core component of what you're doing, the first full-time equivalent person that has a technology element to what they do should be focused on the applications, the data, and the AI, not the firewall, not the network router, not the printer. And you say, well, why is that the case, right? Because those devices are more ubiquitous across industries. So your ability to manage and put a standard in place for your foundational your technologies is really actually pretty easy. But when you get to the application, the data, and the AI, you need them tuned to your business, not just your industry, to your business. So that full-time employee knows your mission, knows your vision, knows your values, your culture, what you're trying to accomplish. They're in the weeds with the employees of understanding the challenges with the applications, where the data sits, and where it could be brought together. That is where your value is going to come, and that is the focus area going forward. So I'll just note the little subheader here because I think it's important. Your competitive advantage is not in the wires. It's found at the nexus of human and digital intelligence, and you're going to see that in those three layers. All right, and so this is a quote that I love because it only supports my prediction that business is going to move faster and because of AI, and therefore the only sustainable competitive advantage is an organization's ability to learn faster than the competition. So continuous learning is the new mindset. All right, so 3 tips to evaluate your starting point as an organization. Number 1, who's leading your business strategy? And the sub point here is business over technology. It is business that drives the use case, business that drives the ROI from the technology, not vice versa. If you do it the other direction, you're going to be part of the statistics and you're going to see a failure in the transformation. So who's leading it? And your digital strategy should be absolutely coupled with your overall strategy. It's not something separate. What's your current state? So your current state, and this is something that's not that difficult to accomplish, inventory what you have at those top 3 levels. What applications are you using? Where are your data sets? And then your workflows. If you're already using some AI, put that on the list as well. What you'll be able to do is start to understand what you have to start with and be able to figure out where to go from there. And then at the end, if you're going to start where you start with leadership, you start with the culture, and then the data. So you look at, after you did your inventory, you say, okay, we've got leadership buy-in, we understand our culture, and therefore we're going to start here with this data set, and we're balance that against risk, right? So when you start down your AI transformational journey, you want to make sure you're starting out with a lower risk opportunity to get into it, to understand it, to move it forward before you go after those higher risk situations. All right, so section 2, we're just going to recap. Digital transformation begins with people and culture. Your competitive advantage is going to emerge from the intersection of apps, data, and AI. That's where you need to focus. And then let's, if you haven't started already, start today. Start today. And so we're going to move into the 3rd section of the presentation. We're going to talk about context and perspective and why that's important with AI. All right. Prompts plus context equal relevancy. Everyone's heard of prompt engineering. Okay, so you're going to engineer your prompts as you talk to your generative AI. Yep, you need to do that. I'm going to give you a great example of why context really improves your ability to get better relevancy and push back against getting hallucinations. And we're not going to get into a lot about the hallucinations piece. We're just going to focus on the context, but this helps mitigate that. All right, so let's take an example. Start with an example. A trip to London, right? Let's say I was going to go on a trip to London, right? I heard about someone going to London recently, and I'm like, oh man, I want to go to London. So I could go to a search engine, right? And I could search trip to London, whatever I type in. And what am I going to get from that type of tool? Well, I'm going to get a list, a static list of results that are based on relevancy. Now, search engines today have a lot of context, right? Because they track what we, right? How we're getting tracked on everything we do when we're using a device. And so if I search a trip to London, my results are going to be different than someone else's. But at the end of the day, what am I going to get? I'm going to get how to get there, maybe. I might get where I could stay, something about lodging. I might get some results that tell me about what to see. I might get results that tell me to where I can get a deal, right? Because there's a lot of stuff around the sales piece. And I might get a result that points me to some kind of travel agency or whatever. And so then let's take the same idea, but what if I called a travel agent and said, I want to go to London? What's a travel agent going to do? Well, the travel agent's going to ask questions because travel agent wants context. They want to know, well, is this for business? Is this a personal trip? What are the dates? Or are you just looking for to go at a good time of year? What are your must-dos while you're there, right? They're going to ask for that context. And by asking for it, what are they going to be able to provide me? A much more robust answer to how to plan this trip and make sure it meets my goals. So the results are based on the availability of context when you're using generative AI because the same principles apply. So if I want to go to a trip on London and I want to use generative AI, I want to give it context in the prompt, and there's several ways in which you can do that before I actually ask it to generate something for me in relation to planning my trip. So for example, I might give the generative AI, I may say, well, I want to go to London. It's a business trip, but I'm allowed to take the family. The business is paying for the hotel, so I want to spend more on the on the airline tickets, maybe get a better class of ticket. While I'm there, I absolutely want to go see Big Ben, and we're going on these dates. By giving it all of that context before I say, now generative AI, be a travel expert and plan me a trip based on those variables, I'm going to get a much better result than if I just simply typed in trip to London. And so your context is really important as you use generative AI, and you want to make sure you're thinking that through as you use it. The other area that we want to just touch on for generative AI is the word perspective and doing a perspective check. All of these tools, and you might have heard this, are very aligned to, they're designed to align to you. And so you're probably going to get an affirm bias where it's more likely to affirm what you're asking than it is to tell you you're wrong. It's trained to be supportive, and because that makes it feel more positive and then more comfortable to use. But this creates risk, rubber stamp assumptions, missed flaws, and gaps, and then of course blind spots. So there is a big difference between fact and inference, and that's paramount. Um, and you need to make sure you're checking, right? Because fact, AI is predicting predicting you an answer. So how do you manage this perspective issue when you're using generative AI? And so here's an example of a prompt that you could use, something like this. This is one of mine that I use. But basically all I'm doing is telling it now to review the conversation, right? And then come back to me with 3 points of view, one that's neutral and unbiased, one that's an opposing point of view, and one that's encouraging. And what that allows me to do is now decipher between the three. What do I need to know coming from this so that I can use it effectively moving forward, and also protect myself from making bad assumptions? All right. So with that, there's a tip, and that tip is you should build a prompt library, at least for the time being, because most of the generative AIs don't offer this opportunity natively within their tools, but I'm sure that's coming. You can do that a couple different ways. I know some people will just have a document and they'll just copy and paste them out of a document, but having templates for your most commonly used prompts is helpful. There is software out there that'll do text replacement if you're a Mac iOS user. It's native to the OS, so you can use it across all of your devices, your iPad and your iPhone. Pretty sure if it's a Windows or an Android, I haven't seen that be native, that you have to do a third-party application for it. Well, how does that work? It basically allows you to create a shortcut that then will be replaced by a much longer version of a text. So my most commonly used prompt is right there on the screen, and it's acknowledge the following concept with a short reply. And I type that out I use all of my shortcuts starting with the letter X, because almost no words start with the letter X. And I'll go XATF space, and it'll put that in. How's that an advantage to me? Well, let's go back to the idea of asking generative AI to help me plan my trip to London. Acknowledge the following with a short reply. It's a business trip, but I'm taking the family. Enter. AI is going to take it. It's not going to spill out a whole bunch of information that I'm not ready to read. I can type it really quick again. We're going in October. Enter. Type it again. Oh, what else do I want to remember? Oh, I want to go see Big Ben, right? I can very rapidly submit context to the model, then say, okay, now now be the travel agent, provide me the guide. And so this is just one of the ways in which a prompt library can be very helpful. And then of course you saw the one with the point of views. There are a whole bunch of different use cases for having a prompt library, but if you're using just generative AI in that sense, having this can be very helpful. All right, section 3. We're just going to recap these three quick items. You want to force multiple perspectives. You want to lead AI with context, and then template your core prompts. All right. So then we're just going to go in here. 3 key takeaways for what we covered. One, AI is a tool. It predicts, but humans decide, right? So be prepared to make decisions, understand what it's doing in its prediction, know its capabilities, seek to build proficiency. Number 2, transformation starts with people, right? So go out there, feel free to inventory your tools, understand your data, but anchor that success around people and clear leadership as you do your transformation. And then 3, context and perspective are the compass for AI. The better the context you provide, it's going to sharpen the relevancy. And then when you use that perspective check, it helps make sure you're getting a balanced output. And then because, again, I like all my West Virginia ties, John Chambers, if your foundation isn't AI, you're going to be left behind. So I would, goes back to the idea of getting started today. All right, so if you're going to continue your AI journey, there's a few things here as a call to action. Feel free to take the initiative and go after it. Don't wait to experiment. Start small steps, start with low risk use cases, but start today. Go ahead and adopt that mindset of continuous learning. Innovation is going to accelerate. The amount of data we're going to be dealing with is exponentially going to grow. You're going to have to manage the fact that certainty is no longer the future. It's always going to be an interpretation of data and making decisions based on that. But again, humans are unique in our ability to have an intuition, and we're going to need to use that in addition to critical thinking. And then feel free to reach out to me. If you scan the QR code, it'll take you to my LinkedIn page. You can connect. You can send me a note on LinkedIn, or if you want to email me at my email address with alpha.jspence@myalphainnovations.com. Feel free to reach out to me. Happy to answer any questions, point you in the right direction, and support you if I can. And so we'll see. I think there's one more slide here. Yep. That takes us into a Q&A period, and so we'll see where we're at with questions, if there are any.
All right, well, thank you so much, Josh, for that wonderful presentation. I think I speak for everybody here that we learned a lot about AI today. And so to kick off the Q&A part of this presentation, I do have a question. What is your favorite way to use AI, whether it's with writing tools, or I know that you can use it to create graphics and different types of design. What is your favorite way personally to use AI?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like to use it to shape and collect my thoughts in a way to where I can put all of that together and use it effectively later. So with the ability now to turn on your microphone, whether you do it direct within the AI or you allow your phone to transcribe your voice, you can just kind of spill out a bunch of thoughts that you might have around something and not be concerned about if it makes a whole lot of sense if someone else was listening to you, but just get it out of your head, because we're just struggling with the fact that we put so much in our head, and just get it out and let it consume it. And then if you give it proper context and say, okay, now give me that back in a structured format, aligned to this context and purpose, so that I can then now have that and review it and say, okay, now I understand what's all going on, and this is going to move here and this is going to move there. That's one way in which I like to use it, is just be able to kind of let myself go with all the thoughts that are racing through my head, and then bring them together in a useful format.
It's definitely a powerful tool. And just as a reminder, if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box or in the chat, and we will get to them. So we do have one question from Tara Martinez, and she asked, do you have any suggestions for a micro-credential program for AI certifications?
I don't know of any off the top of my head, other than I know there are several out there, and there are several out there that are even free too, and they can come from larger universities too. So you can find some micro credentialing from some where they've made at least the initial course or some of the courses free. So I would recommend using an AI, asking it that very question, but give it context, right? So is there a specific area in which you want to understand with AI? Is it AI in business or others? And then give it that context. Say, okay, now provide me locations or opportunities online to do that micro credentialing. But I know there are a bunch out there. There are a bunch to pick from.
Thanks, Josh. I actually have a question for you. I know that we have partnered together for the Business Summit before, and you have partnered with other organizations to do similar things. Could you kind of walk us through that, through people who are on the call, and maybe tell other businesses how they might be able to take advantage of that resource?
Yeah, say that again. Which resource?
Yeah, when we partnered together for the business summit and we did, those daily recaps, I know when we did it, it was new for us, it was new for you. We kind of learned a lot of things together, which was great. And then after that, people saw that at the business summit and then reached out from other organizations. They're like, oh, we would love to have this at our event. If you could just walk everyone on the call through what exactly that entailed and maybe how other businesses would be able to benefit from that resource or something similar.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. So what we were doing is we were leveraging the ability to capture presentations in real time and then transcribe those presentations and then process them through a large language model with context to garner out the key elements of the presentations, whether it be a single speaker or a panel discussion, and then turn that around into a concise output. What we find today, I think, is our attention spans are tough, right? These devices we talked about are always drawing upon our attention. And so I think we put a lot of time and energy into these great opportunities for people to come together and learn. But sometimes you just happen to miss out on something because you get distracted for a moment. This was a way to create a follow-on resource that you could go back and see, okay, hey, I kind of missed that panel, but here's the key areas in which they covered and learn about that quickly. And I think that's an interesting approach because today, what are we doing, right? We're transcribing meeting minutes using AI today, but most people I talk to are not using those meeting minutes. They already sat through the meeting, right? Who wants to go back through and read the transcription? But let's think about the power of AI. If you could take those transcriptions and you could push them through a funnel, and that funnel of a context is, okay, what do I need to know as a business owner to drive our strategy forward? What do I get on the back end? You might find that you can learn insights from meetings that where that transcriptions is capturing that information. So I think those are things to consider going forward with how that stuff works. And then, of course, like I said, we did that first time ever too with the chamber, and we felt like it was a good way to experiment and try to use AI in a different way.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you again so much for that. And I think that that was just a great resource. It's still available on our website right now on wbchamber.com. So if you miss anything from the business summit, you can still go back and read the recaps. And it was a real big benefit to us. So thank you again.
And we do have another question from Carrie. And she's asking if she's saying that they're looking to identify trends in health problems throughout the state. And they're asking if there's a model you would recommend to look at that can analyze the data and give patterns or predictions based on location, thinking about cancers and maybe other diseases as well. So especially focusing on that healthcare realm.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And you hear about models a lot, right? There's the ones that are everybody hears about with OpenAI's model, and then you got Grok, you got Anthropic with Claude, different large scale models. Those are all the out there for that generalized purpose. When you're getting into a very specialized lane, like in healthcare, the model will make a difference. So it will matter the data. It's going to matter the type of data you're working with, and then you're going to have to work to train that model specifically to that data set to get those high level or high accurate prediction results. So it's not easy to be able to say which model just off of something general like that, other than to say that those types of use cases, you'll definitely want to go through a process of inventorying the data that you have, the data that you might be able to also obtain, and then looking at it from that lens, and then being able to determine which model will provide a better option.
Thank you very much for that. And to kind of piggyback off of that question, what is your favorite model to use, whether it's for business or personal use, whether it's ChatGPT, Google Gemini? I know that they have Apple AI now. What is your favorite platform to use for both personal and professional use?
For general use, I still use OpenAI with ChatGPT probably the most. But I can tell you when you're doing coding, Claude is a much better model of one of them out there for generalized coding if you're trying to do anything like that. So these matter. The most interesting thing, and I don't know if you thought about this part, but using one model to help you create the prompt to use in another model for a task. That's another thing that goes beyond where I think most people are thinking today. Like, I'll give you a great example. People say, well, I asked it to create this image, but it couldn't quite create the image right. Yeah, stop, go explain in context what the image is supposed to look like, then say, okay, now give me the prompt that I can take over here to this other app and have it generate the picture. And it'll give you a much more robust prompt that you couldn't draft yourself. So, or it would take a lot of time. So that's just some tips there of using the different models too.
And Josh, this is not so much a question, but more of a thank you. So I don't know if you had a chance. I was a little bit late jumping on the call. I was on my way back from Logan, but in case everybody in the call, Josh is the chair of the state's AI task force. I have the privilege of serving with Josh on that task force. And so I just wanted to thank you for your leadership in this realm. You've been incredible. When I first joined the task force, I knew about that much on AI, and maybe I now know about this much. So but largely to you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Josh. Thanks everyone on the call for joining us today. And thank you so much, Josh, again, for sharing your time and expertise for our Business Academy. For those wondering, this will be available to watch on wvchamber.com and on our YouTube channel. And if anyone on the call is interested in hosting a Business Academy for themselves, you can reach out to me. My email is kjorge@wvchamber.com. And with that, I will round us out. Everyone have a great day.